You hear him on 95.7 The Game all the time, and that is none other than Anthony Slater. And all guests on 95.7 The Game appear on the River Islands guest line. Isn't it time for you to discover the islands, River Islands in Lathrop? Hey, Anthony, what's going on, man?
What's up? How are y'all?
You know what, man? We're doing pretty good. What did you make of what Joe Lacob said yesterday, specific to the idea of that number 2 scorer? The first name that popped out of his mouth was Andrew Wiggins, and I heard Warrior fans across the bay roll their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, the clip you played right there was interesting for several reasons. Obviously, he's referring to LeBron as like, look at how well Steph can age, which is fine. But I do think one thing the Lakers have done well is get him Anthony Davis, right? I mean, like that is his second star that's supposed to guide him to the next era. Now, I think the Lakers' rest of the roster build has been questionable. Certainly, right now, if you were picking the West, like the Warriors and Lakers are probably in the same play-in realm. So it's not to say that the Lakers have better built the roster. I think the Warriors are set up depth-wise, 3 to 12 in the roster, way better. But like that's the problem, right? Like Steph Curry, as he ages, away from being an All-NBA first-teamer until last year he was All-NBA third-teamer. He needs like a 27-year-old superstar. And they don't have that. And, I like the Markkanen idea. And maybe if you pair Markkanen with a deep team, that is fringe contention, maybe ambitiously, but also like, that's not Anthony Davis, right? That's not an all NBA first, second teamer. So and again, that's like the hardest thing to acquire in the league, but that's where I see the difference.
And if you can continue down that road with the Markkanen pursuit, do they have the assets and would they be willing to part with enough for that to actually come to pass here before we get into August?
We'll see. I mean, you mentioned August 6th to me is the date. I mean, that's the Markkanen declaration date. That's where Utah loses a lot of leverage. That's where not only the Jazz, but Markkanen have to declare their future together in a lot of ways. Like Markkanen is extension eligible. I know you guys kind of know some of the mechanics here, but he's extension eligible August 6th on a deal that the Jazz can give him way more than the Warriors or any other outside team can give because they have this open cap space to renegotiate and extend. Take him from $18 million next year to, whatever it is, 30-something million, and then extend off that number, whereas theoretically, if he got traded to the Warriors, they can only extend him off that $18 million number. So there's a lot of financial appeal to Markkanen and extending. And if he does it on August 6th, that means he can be traded February 6th at the trade deadline. If he wants to wait and ensure he's with Utah at least a year on that extension, he can wait till August 7th. And we'll just get answers then, because it makes no sense for him not to be extended if he wants to be in Utah long term. But if he doesn't sign an extension right around that time, that's a signal too of perhaps his intention. So I think the Warriors rightly are being very patient right now. They're not just going to throw the entire boat for Markkanen, because clearly the Jazz don't have an outside offer that's appealing enough for they would have pulled the trigger at this point. And then I think we'll get answers to his future in Utah or non-future right around then.
Anthony, can we get a likelihood barometer from you? Because I spent a good portion of yesterday going, look, I call BS on Utah really actually wanting to or planning to trade Lauri Markkanen. If you were to handicap this for the Warriors and for this season, what are the chances Lauri Markkanen plays here?
I would say a few weeks ago you were hearing that there's a legitimate shopping going on, particularly like early in free agency. But the fact that it has dragged on this long, the fact that I think Utah protecting their cap space in free agency was a pretty big signal, about their plans with Markkanen. I think the Danny Ainge factor in this has made a lot of the league skeptical that he'd actually pull the trigger. That a lot of the talk that some people viewed as serious was him just gauging what his true value is, because that's what Danny Ainge does. So I guess that's a wide ranging to say of I would definitely go under 50%, maybe even lower. But, Utah does have a situation to decide. Do they want to hit the full rebuild? Do they want to go after the Cooper Flags of the world, these next two drafts? And then Lauri Markkanen, he wants to win. And, I don't think Lauri Markkanen or anybody in that Utah core has loved the last two seasons when Utah hits the eject button on what had been a decent season up to the deadline, and they traded away their guys to protect their picks, their top 10 protected picks. So I think Lauri Markkanen wants some money that Utah can provide, but I think he probably wants some answers on, like, you know, how deep and long a rebuild is this going to be? And if it is set to be one for the next several seasons, then I could see him seeing some appeal elsewhere.
Yeah, and the appeal to play with Steph obviously would be very high, but it would take a lot, I think, for the Warriors to acquire him. And I think an interesting one for me, Anthony, is the future of Jonathan Kuminga, because he would be eligible for an extension, much like Jordan Poole got, that wouldn't kick in for a year. How interested are the Warriors in giving Jonathan Kuminga that big kind of Jordan Poole extension?
Yeah, they're going to talk to him. And if both sides can come to a reasonable number, I don't expect some, like, you know, we have Franz Wagner got the auto max. Like, if that was going to be on the table, then it would already be done. But, you know, I don't think that's where it's headed number-wise. But I do think if the Warriors believe they can, that Jonathan Kuminga will take an offer that maintains his market value, which, you know, it was part of why they made the Poole offer. They thought that was going to be a positive value on the trade market. It really tanked over that year, and they ended up having to attach a first rounder to him. I would expect them to be more careful this time around, partly because of that. But, you know, I would say conversations have slowly started up. I think it won't really get serious until closer to training camp and into training camp. If I had to forecast it, I think it would depend on if they get Markkanen done or not, because that changes every equation. But assuming they don't, I still could see, because of what I think Kuminga can command, especially with a huge season, which, I mean, he would believe he can have, I could see it going into restricted free agency next year.
Anthony Slater, the Athletic, a Warrior insider, joining us. Willard and Dibs in the Jacked Up Lineup Week. We are hanging out in the morning. Bonte and Joe later, Steiny and Goo later this afternoon. We're talking Warrior basketball after Joe Lacob's comments yesterday here on 95.7 The Game. Okay, Anthony, if no Markkanen, is it Markkanen or bust, or are there other players that would interest the Warriors?
I think right now, as you know, has been reported, like they're kind of waiting this one out. Let's say August 7th comes around, and 6th would be even more interesting. The 7th, and Lauri Markkanen signs the 4-year big boat extension in Utah. That would take him completely off the table through the trade deadline. So you would know you literally can't even get him at all next season. I don't sense from the Warriors is there would be suddenly August 8th, got to frantically search around the league, got to find, Zach LaVine, should they pluck him, or Brandon Ingram, should they get in those sweepstakes? I think they would take 2 steps back. I think they're okay going into camp with the 14 they currently have. They've almost built it out right now for a full roster. I think there's belief this team could win games and, be in the 4 or 5, 6 seed mix. That to me feels like a ceiling, but the playoff mix. And then I think that they would and probably should be an aggressive pre-trade deadline team. They have the assets. They've shown they're willing to trade the first round picks. They have young guys that appeal across the league. They have a hungry Steph Curry, and they can be a buyer. But a buyer doesn't mean you have to be a buyer on August 8th, August 9th. You can wait it out. You can see if there is a better fit guy out there. I think part of why they want Markkanen so bad is because he's such an obvious fit for what they need, age and skill set wise. I don't think Brandon Ingram is. I don't think Zach LaVine is on that big contract. So maybe you go into December, January, and somebody pops free that we're not even talking about right now. Obviously the dream name would be it goes really poorly in Milwaukee and Giannis somehow becomes available. I'm not expecting that to happen. Certainly not reporting that is likely, but you know what I mean? You can kind of let it play out, and I think they believe they have enough of a roster right now where they're not just going to suddenly go, 10-25 out of the gate if they don't make a trade.
Heading into the deadline, do they have too much of a roster? And you were mentioning, between players 3 and 12, they have a bunch of different guys. Steve kind of had trouble last year with the rotation because they had too many pieces. Is that going to be plaguing them again this year?
Yes, that does kind of seem like the flaw of the roster again. And, you're sitting there looking at Moses Moody for the 4th straight season. You're rotation ready, but then camp comes around. It's are you the 10th man again? Are you getting DMPs? But, to your wider question, I do think where there's a difference this season compared to last season is I just think there's less of, or I guess it would be more of an earn your way type situation heading into camp. There's no Klay Thompson guaranteed rotation spot no matter the slump he's in. I think, there'd be a quicker, pull of an Andrew Wiggins. There would be more like go win jobs. I mean, Steve went, I believe, on your guys' network and said like basically every rotation spot, starting spot is open. I mean, obviously that doesn't include like Steph Curry and Draymond, but I think they need to they're not as top heavy as you want to be if you want to contend for a title, as we're talking about, and why a big trade needs to be made. But I do think the depth would be in a fresher, healthier place this season because he wouldn't be as married to certain players, even if they're in slumps.
Slates, we've heard for a while now that the Warriors really do not want to trade Jonathan Kuminga. No one's untouchable, but he's pretty darn close. All of a sudden, Brandon Podziemski's name is becoming a big one. Vibe around him in Summer League real good. Multiple reports that say that Utah, for example, would be more interested in him than Kuminga. What is the Warriors' overall view of Podziemski and their appetite or lack thereof to include him in talks?
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to trade him. He is, beloved organizationally. They think he has like winning qualities. And I would say the rare aspects of Podziemski compared to their other recent draft picks is not only obviously does the front office love the talent and draft him and want him to play, but the head coach as a rookie, couldn't keep him off the floor, right? I mean, Steve Kerr's putting him in his best lineups last year. His plus minus is great. He's raving about him, as a rookie. So there is not much of an appetite for the Warriors to trade him. Now, again, if it comes down to a major trade and he is the swing piece, sometimes you do have to give stuff up. We'll see. But yeah, they're not actively looking to move him. But part of the reason why he has an appeal not only to the Warriors, but on the market to a team like Utah, he's got 3 more years of very cheap money. He's just entering year 2 of a 4-year rookie deal, and he was the 19th overall pick. That's really cheap, labor in a lot of ways. So but that's also why the Warriors want to protect him.
I mean, this may not be a fair way to ask, but who would they dig their fingernails into more to keep, Kuminga or Pods?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on the player coming back. There would be, as you guys know, in sports, there is various opinions within an organization. I think too often we say, well, the Warriors think this. Well, it's like, hey, there's 95 opinions that matter within the Warriors. And obviously some are more important than others. But there'd be a debate, I'll tell you that. And it would be interesting. But the other aspect of it is, a team like Utah, who would they prefer? Who would more easily get it done for them? Who, if you put on the table, do you get to take maybe picks off the table? It's all a big gumbo value play from both sides that gets mixed into one, and then the 7 most important opinions in the organization come into a room and have to make that choice. And I'm not sure the answer to that right now.
Yeah, and the financial part of it is fascinating with 3 years of team control. What about Andrew Wiggins, Slates? Is there any ability for the Warriors to find somebody who might see Andrew Wiggins as the player he was 2 years ago?
I would say I think too often when Andrew Wiggins is spoken about in trade terms, I think people have a really but that contract. The contract's actually not that bad. He played 71 games last year. If he does hit his threes historically, he's 37, 38%, he can defend on the perimeter. Obviously, we all know his flaws. Availability 2 seasons ago was not great, and he can kind of fluctuate in and out. But he's $24-25 million a year. I mean, you look at people were wondering why the Warriors wouldn't have traded the Chris Paul contract, which they were going to cut anyways, and Wiggins for Zach LaVine. It's Zach LaVine's 3 for 138 the next 3 years, obviously, and Andrew Wiggins is 3 for 84. That's way less. Right. And in this second apron world where 3 million feels important to duck aprons and all this. Andrew Wiggins at 24 million, 29-year-old, two-way wing is probably too strong at this point, although he's shown it a couple of years ago. So to answer your question, I do think he's at least, and I remember hearing this at the deadline, he's at least net zero value. You don't have to attach an asset to get off his contract. I think there's plenty of contending teams across the league that'd be we could plug Andrew Wiggins in for 33 minutes a night on the wing at $24 million a year in this new expensive world. And that's fine. But also, you know what? The Warriors need him. I know maybe Warriors fans don't want to hear that, but unless the roster is rebuilt and you get better wing play, he's your best point of attack defender next year. He's going to shoot the 3 at a higher volume than most of your other guys. And he's, again, like you said earlier, it's not a good thing for the Warriors that Joe Lacob is mentioning. He might be their second most reliable scorer. I actually think it's Kuminga, but I mean, he still can get you 18 a night. So you don't just give that skill set away, give that contract away.
Slates, real quick, do you agree with Joe Lacob in his assessment that as constructed right now, the Warriors are definitely better than they were last year?
Oh, man, I only view that if you, guarantee, is Draymond Green going to play 70-something games? Is Steph Curry – what did Steph Curry play last year? I mean, he was in 73, 74 games.
It's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so you guarantee those two guys are there on an almost nightly basis. I do think, the young guys are better, right? Brandon Podziemski's out of the rotation. Trace Jackson-Davis out of the rotation to start last year. Don't even break into it until midseason. Kuminga is a worse player at the start of last season than he would be this season. I like some of their signings. So I think, yes, collectively, they are a better team to start this next season than they were to start last season. Maybe not end. But again, 9-10 seed last year? Okay, well, the 7 seed's better. But is that what they should be aiming for? Because that's about the realm that I would predict them to be in, 7-8 range.
Anthony, great stuff, man. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, fellas. I enjoyed the morning chat with you guys. Very rare.
Yeah. I mean, you're allowed to call in between 2 and 6.
Anytime.
You're allowed.
You guys are allowed to reach out to me.
That's a good point, too. That's a good point.
It's tough as a former Casa Grande Gaucho to reach out to somebody who went to Rancho Cotati. It's hard for me.
Cougars. I like it. Yeah. Well, I now know why that I'm only asked to come on the morning show.
The plot thickens. There you have it. I'll keep working on him, Anthony. Good to talk to you, buddy.
All right, fellas.
All right, there